One of the biggest mistakes that I see people do with pocket hole joinery is... Welcome back, guys. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing something a little different. This is kind of a concept thing. I'm thinking about starting another series called Back to the Basics. I get tons and tons of basic use questions on different types of tools, and that is completely fine because that is how you learn. Maybe someone needs to address these questions before we say, hey, use this tool. This one's going to be all about pocket joinery. Kreg Tools contacted me a couple of months ago to make a video for their YouTube channel, and I did it on going back to the basics of the tool. Then I realized, hey, on my channel, we do all kinds of pocket hole joinery. So why haven't I already done this for my own channel? I just say, hey, we're going to throw a couple pocket holes in. But what people do not realize is you would do it differently if you were doing this type of a joint, or this type of a joint, a T-joint with two different sizes, or edge trimming. In this video, I'm going to be teaching you a little bit of everything about pocket hole joinery, from the screws, what size to use, what length to use, what thread to use. It can be confusing at times. How do you know where to set your jigs? How do you put pocket holes in corners? I'll be covering all of that. And if you like this concept of going back to the basics and breaking down some of these tools, make sure to let me know in the comments. Give me some other ideas, what tools that you would like to see broken down, miter saws, table saws, whatever that you would like. Of course, do not forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. So let's go ahead and jump into this video. So we're going to start with a very quick overview of Kreg's two most popular jigs, the 520 and the 720 Pro. Both of these machines are very versatile, and I actually use them both in different applications. So the 720, this is how she comes. So we have our workstation, and in the back, all of our tools in one place. That way we know where they are and where to put them back. The wings will fold down, and inside the wings there will be extra storage. The 720 can be used in this position, or it can be used in this position, whichever is more comfortable and whichever one applies best to the project that you are working on. But my favorite feature of the 720 is the auto locking system. It will adjust itself based on the thickness of the material that you are putting pocket holes in. So the main accessories that will come with your jig are the two different lengths of screw bits. You will have your actual drill bit itself. You have a multi-tool of sorts. Let's say that you're working with some odd size material like 5/8. It's not printed on the side of this or onto the bit itself. So you would just loosen your collar, then you can put it back into its storage place, and printed on the sides are different lengths. And then we have the 520 Pro. And so with the 520 out of its docking station, it is one of the most versatile pocket hole tools that I've ever seen. This is one of my favorite tools. You can literally use this in every position, sideways, upside down, whatever that your project needs. Very lightweight but heavy duty and extremely versatile. You will tighten your material down by using a squeeze trigger and release with a release trigger. Let's say that you're going to be making several pocket holes in, let's say, a piece of 3/4 material. You will slide your guide up to 3/4 of an inch, and it's actually written here on the side, 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1.5 inches. So with pocket hole joinery, there are two main things that you have to remember. The depth that you set your drill bit at will always be the thickness of your wood. So that will determine where you set your collar. But the next thing is, what size screws do you use? Your screw length is always determined by the thickness of the material that you're attaching your board to. So speaking of screws, let me show you some different types of screws, lengths of screws, and we'll go over when we would use each one and why. Okay, so before we actually get into the screws themselves, let me show you the inside look of the anatomy of the pocket hole. So when you're making your pocket hole with the drill bit, it will bore out a hole and countersink the tip. And then once you place your screw in, it will follow the countersink using the tip of the screw, which is self-tapping. You can see the little groove cut in there. As it goes into your pocket hole, it will be augering out material with this cutter head until it reaches the flat spot. So that's how it sits, and that is one of the important designs of a pocket hole screw. This little shelf that the bit cuts is actually made for the top of the screw head to rest in. This prevents your screw from going any further than this. Like a deck screw would continue to go in until you stop driving it. A pocket hole screw will actually stop at this lip. So to fully understand how the pocket hole screws worked, you had to know the anatomy of the pocket hole itself. So we have our flat top that keeps it from going down any further. We have our self-drilling tips, and then we also have this smooth shank here. I'm going to throw a chart into the corner of the screen here. I'm also going to see if we can get that into the description so you can print that out. But the most common pocket hole lengths are 1 inch, 1 1/4 inch, and 2 1/2 inch. And this big beast here is a newer product from Kreg. It is actually used for 2x4 and 4x4 material. The 2 1/2s, they are going to be used for 2x4 material, or 1.5 inches thick. The 1 1/4 inch screw is going to be for 3/4 material, and the 1 inch screw is going to be for 1/2 inch material. One of the other things that you may notice that is different between these two screws is the threads. So we have a fine thread and we have a coarse thread. So the coarse thread, which is what you'll probably be using the most on any of these lengths, are going to be for your softer wood. So it's going to be like for your pine, your fir, poplar, things like that. Any type of plywood or MDF will also be using the coarse thread. Your fine thread screws, these are for your hardwoods, okay? So these are less aggressive. So hardwoods are more fibrous, like oak, maple, cherry. They're more dense. And if you ever have any questions about screw selection, I'm going to throw a link into the description connecting you to this site. Super cool site that Kreg set up. You just answer a couple of questions and it will tell you exactly which one of these screws that you need for your project. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and drill some holes using the 720, and so I'm using 3/4 inch material. So I have my bit set up at 3/4 inch. With the auto locking system, I do not have to worry about setting the depth. It will set itself. And this is what it would look like. Now, this brings me to another very commonly asked question. Why are the holes not all centered on the jig itself? Well, Kreg actually did that for a reason. This is preset for 4 inch, 3 inch, and 2 inch material. So let's say that you're going to be putting pocket holes on the end of 3 1/2 or 4 inch material. So for this, you'd actually use the 2 outer holes, okay? And that would give you 2 pocket holes in 1 piece of material. And if you're using 3 inch material, then you'll use these 2 holes. And this will ensure that the pocket hole spacing is far enough from the edge. Now these 2 that are really close together, that's going to be for your 2 inch material. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of different types of joints. This is probably the most common. This is called a box joint. I've left the front off as well as the top just so you can see what's going on in here. So this is the same material that we just cut. So it's 3/4 inch thick, meaning that I'm going to be using 1 1/4 inch screw. Let's say it's an indoor project, it's a cabinet. So I'll just be using the zinc screws. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that I see people do with pocket hole joinery is that it is very tempting just to use an impact driver to install these screws, okay? The issue with that is with impact driver, you cannot set the torque. It is made to just drive. The problem with that is that you will actually strip the wood as it goes in, because this lip is preventing it from going down any further. So it'll just keep spinning until there's nothing left for the screw to hold on to. So instead of using an impact driver, you actually need to use a drill because you can adjust the torque. So when we are using this to cut our pocket holes, it's just set on a drill setting. We don't need the torque relief for that. So this is the sound that you want while you're setting your screw. It's a nice tight joint without sinking and stripping your screw holes. So again, this would be an example of a box joint. It's probably one of the most common joints because you use it in cabinetry and making drawers. But let me show you a couple of others. Okay, so with this joint is actually an example of a couple of different things. This is what we would call a T-joint. So it's basically like when one piece of wood does not meet on the end. But I put this together for another example of when you're joining 2 different sizes of material. What do you do? What screw do you use? Remember, the screw is always determined by the material that you are drilling into, okay? So the material that you are connecting to. So since this material was 1.5 inches thick, although this material was only 3/4, I still use the screw for 1.5 inches material, which is going to be 2.5 inches long. So T-joint and 2 different sizes of material. And this is a miniature version of another very common type of joint that you would use pocket hole joinery for, and that is going to be a butt joint. You have your rails and your stiles connecting together flush, And here's an example of a T-joint. But this is the basic example of a butt joint and how you would use pocket hole joinery to make this type of a joint. And another tip, in your workpiece, if you ever see this, where the pilot hole is actually drilled all the way through, that means that your collar is not set on the drill bit to the correct depth. It may have slipped, or you may have forgotten to change it from the previous use. So if you're drilling and you ever see the little blue shavings start to come up, stop. That means that you've done that. And everyone out there, I promise you, if you look at their pocket hole jigs, you will see something that looks like this. No matter how long, and I've done thousands and thousands of pocket holes with this machine. You see those holes? Those weren't put there by Kreg. Those were put there by Peach. And again, that is from the collar itself not being set correct. In this case, I simply forgot to change my collar from my previous workpiece. In this case, the very first pocket hole that I cut with a 520, I was so excited about getting it in. I cut a hole through the middle of my machine. But luckily, Kreg anticipates this and designs it to where you're not going to be hitting anything metal or messing with the structure in any way. So this application would be called a shelf edge. Let's say that you built something out of plywood, but you want the edging to be hardwood or just a nicer type of wood. You want to cover up the plywood edges. That's where you would use this. So from underneath of a shelf, or on top, depending on how high that it is, you could put this solid wood shelf edge onto plywood. Now, you see how this one actually hangs over to make that shelf ledge. You could also do this by cutting here. So we cut this off. You could put the same joint on it, go all the way around, and it's kind of like edge trimming a piece of plywood. So instead of the iron-on edging that you can get, you can actually put solid wood edge trimming and turn a piece of plywood into a really nice shelf. So for miter corners, you're going to have to look down into your jig itself to see exactly where you need to place them, especially once you get into smaller mitered corners. So this is a 3-inch piece of wood. Because of the length of the pocket that this is making, I do not want to go any higher or it will bust out the side. With 2 pocket holes and glue, this is going to be more than strong enough. Now let me show you what to look for in the jig itself. So this is what it looks like in the pocket hole jig itself, okay? So you're actually going to be placing the angled section flush. So I'm going to show you with this came off the 520, exactly what we're looking at. So you'll bring it in until the hole is covered, and then the one on the right is also covered. And you know you're set. Well guys, I hope that you have enjoyed this video. I have enjoyed making this video. And I actually got my start back in the day making short form videos about the K4, how to use them, how to set them up, everything that I've just showed you here. So I hope that you were able to take something away from this video. There's a ton of other things that you can learn as you go, but these are the main points for pocket hole joinery. And if you would like to see the full video, head over to Kreg Tools YouTube page. I'll throw a link to that video into the description so you can check that out. So thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, guys, see ya.